You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. I've got to start with basketball. No, I'm not going to talk about All-Star Weekend. I didn't watch any of it. I legitimately couldn't care any less about it. I didn't watch any of the Skills Challenge. I watched a little bit of the three-point contest because I wanted to see Patty Mills, but by the time I turned it on, Mills had already gone, so that was a little upsetting. I didn't watch any of the slam dunk contest. I saw some highlights. Yeah, I agree. It was a bad slam dunk contest. See, the issue with the slam dunk contest is, with all due respect to guys like Obi Toppin and Juan Toscano Anderson, those guys are not two of the best dunkers in the NBA. Maybe they're top 20. I don't know if I'd put them top 10. The thing is, though, none of the stars want to participate in the slam dunk contest. I mean, if Ja Morant was in the slam dunk contest, you'd want to see it. But Toppin, Toscano Anderson, Cole Anthony, and Jalen Green, you've got 3 players there from non-playoff teams. You have 4 players there that the average NBA fan probably doesn't know. Also, the dunks that they pulled off really weren't that impressive. There were no 50s. I mean, I'll say this. There are only so many different ways to dunk a basketball. Maybe you have some variations year to year, but the core of the dunk is basically the same. There's just no juice. There's no creativity anymore. There's no star power. I'm glad that I missed the slam dunk contest. As for the game itself, I am proud to say that I didn't watch a second of it. The highlights that I saw on Twitter consisted of no defense whatsoever. I'll give Team Durant credit for keeping it close. Truthfully, seeing as though Durant didn't play and Team LeBron had King James, Giannis, Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, DeMar DeRozan, etc., I really thought that Team LeBron would run away with this, but they didn't. Team Durant kept it close. Give LeBron credit for ending it with the nice fadeaway. Yeah, great, fantastic. No defense, 163 to 160. Is that really what we want? Like I said, I'm proud to say that I didn't watch a second of that game. No, the story that really interests me when it comes to basketball is A, Goran Dragic, but he's not the most important story. No, the most important story is the Basketball Hall of Fame announcing their finalists for their 2022 class. Certainly not as star-studded as it's been recently. No players like Kobe or Garnett or Duncan or Paul Pierce or Bosh or Chris Webber or anyone like that, but still, some good names. I am only going to focus on the people pertaining to the NBA. Why? Because it is my firm belief that the NBA, the greatest basketball league, association, organization, whatever word you want to use, deserves a Hall of Fame all to itself. And we should not combine it with college coaches, high school coaches, or WNBA players. All due respect to people like Lita Andrews and Swin Cash and Marianne Stanley and Lindsay Whalen, but on no planet do they deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as the greats of the game. Players like Michael Jordan and Kareem and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain and Shaq, etc., etc. Whenever I talk about the Basketball Hall of Fame, I say this. It's just true. No one's convinced me otherwise. The women's game is worse than the men's game. Watch an NBA game. Then watch a WNBA game. Tell me which is better. The answer is the NBA game. It's just better. This isn't sexist. This is just fact. Look, I'm all for having a WNBA Hall of Fame. I understand that people like Lisa Leslie and Diana Taurasi and Candace Parker should be recognized, but don't do it in the same place that you're honoring NBA players. See, the thing is, the WNBA is its own league. Like, it's established. Give it credit. It survived an incredibly long time. I remember there were times when people thought it would go belly up, but it survived for 25 years. You think about a Hall of Fame like the Hockey Hall of Fame that has women like Cammie Granado and Angela Ruggiero and Haley Wickenheiser, alongside players like Wayne Gretzky and Gordie Howe and Bobby Orr. Those women didn't really play in established leagues. There's never been a women's hockey league that's made it. It's been tried. Haley Wickenheiser played in the National Women's Hockey League. That league doesn't exist anymore. The Western Women's Hockey League doesn't exist anymore. The Canadian Women's Hockey League doesn't exist anymore. Those women need a place to be honored, so I have no problem honoring them in the Hockey Hall of Fame. The WNBA is established. Like, give it credit. It's the little league that could. They don't need to be lumped in with the Basketball Hall of Fame. It makes zero sense. There's already a Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. Lita Andrews is already in it. Swin Cash is already in it. Marianne Stanley is in it. She's been in it for 20 years. What's the point? It makes 0 sense to honor women in the same place that you are honoring players like Jordan, like Magic, like Bird, like Russell, like Wilt. It makes 0 sense. This isn't sexism. They already have a Hall of Fame. You want to tell me it's not prestigious? You want to tell me no one knows where it is? Okay, fine. I understand that it's not like Cooperstown, or Toronto, or Canton, or Springfield. The Women's Basketball Hall of Fame is in Knoxville, Tennessee. Okay? It's okay if you didn't know that. But we need to honor these people in the right way. The NBA is the greatest basketball league, association, organization, whatever word you want to use, in the world. Flat out. It just is. It deserves a Hall of Fame all to itself. What's the purpose of a Hall of Fame? To honor the best of the best. At its core, that's what every Hall of Fame wants to do. To provide a place where the younger generation can see someone like Babe Ruth or Gordie Howe or Joe Namath or Bill Russell and ask someone what made them so great. Why are they here with players that I recognize? I've never heard of these guys. I never saw them play. What makes them so great? You are diluting the talent pool of the Basketball Hall of Fame by including women. You just are. They're not as good. This is fact. They are not as good as the men. Okay? Take the worst NBA player. Put him up against the best WNBA player in a one-on-one game. The NBA player's winning. I'm sorry, just is. This is fact. I don't think this is sexism. I think this is fact. I am not saying that all men are better at basketball than women. That is absolutely untrue. Every WNBA player could kick my ass in a game of basketball. Every professional women's tennis player could kick my ass in a game of tennis. And look, I'm not enough of a tennis fan to answer the hypothetical who would win, Serena Williams or Novak Djokovic, if they were both in their prime. I'm just not a tennis fan. I can't answer that question. Maybe Serena would win. Maybe Djokovic would win. I honestly don't know. But I am enough of a basketball fan to say that the worst NBA player would beat the best WNBA player. It is unfair to the NBA to lump their greats in with the greats of inferior leagues. That is just unfair. And I'll tell you what's definitely unfair, lumping the college coaches in with the NBA coaches. The College Basketball Hall of Fame is a thing. It's in Kansas City, Missouri. That is where you honor the greats of college basketball. How do you put Bob Huggins in the same breath as someone like George Karl? Come on. Say what you want about George Karl, but can we all agree that in the grand scheme of things, he was a better coach than Bob Huggins? George Karl succeeded in the NBA. Bob Huggins never made it out of college. If you're a success in the NBA as a coach, you are better than a successful college basketball coach. Again, we need to recognize the NBA for what it is. The greatest basketball organization to ever exist. What is the goal of college players? To make it to the NBA. Not all college coaches have that goal. They are perfectly content to stay in college and run schools like Duke or Michigan State or West Virginia. But think about it like this. Who's the best college basketball coach ever? Coach K, right? Maybe some people would say John Wooden. Maybe some people would say Bob Knight. For the purposes of this example, let's say Coach K. Who's the best NBA coach ever? Phil Jackson. I think that's fact. I think that's indisputable. Who is the better coach? Phil Jackson or Mike Krzyzewski? Phil Jackson. Even the NCAA would admit that their form of basketball is inferior to the NBA. I just don't get it. Every freaking year I have this argument. We need to keep them separate. Honor these people the right way. Honor Bob Huggins in Kansas City. I don't know why he is not in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. He should be. There's no question about it. But for Bob Huggins to be mentioned in the same breath as people like Phil Jackson, or Don Nelson, or Lenny Wilkins, or Jerry Sloan, or Pat Riley, it defies all logic. You can't combine entities like this. It doesn't work. If you think about it logically, it makes zero sense. The Basketball Hall of Fame needs a major overhaul. Bill Simmons wanted to tear it down and rebuild it as a pyramid. I don't know if I would go that route, but he was right that the Basketball Hall of Fame needs to be redone. You have someone like John Calipari, who tried to make it in the NBA and failed miserably. Same thing with Rick Pitino. Tried to make it in the NBA, failed miserably. They are now honored in the same place as people like Larry Brown, Red Holtzman, Chuck Daly, and Red Auerbach. It makes zero sense. Can we all agree that the college game is worse than the pro game? You have worse players. How many players dominate in college, but do nothing in the pros? Jimmer Fredette. Fredette dominated at BYU. Didn't make it. Luka Garza was a force at Iowa. I loved watching him play. He hasn't set the world on fire with the Pistons. I'll go further back. Roosevelt Chapman dominated at Dayton. Never played a game in the NBA. Ernie DiGregorio was good his rookie year, but never developed his defense and only lasted 5 seasons in the NBA. He was fantastic at Providence. How do you honor the greats of the college game in the same place as the greats of the NBA game? It makes no sense. Honor the best of the best. Yeah, next up, the Baseball Hall of Fame is going to honor great college baseball players. Or no, maybe some great high school baseball players. Oh, it's a joke. It makes no sense. Basketball Hall of Fame is a joke. It's by far and away the worst Hall of Fame there is. Can we just agree that someone like Shawn Marion should be a finalist over Lita Andrews? Can we agree that someone like Buck Williams, one of the greatest Nets of all time, deserves to be a finalist over Swin Cash? That Michael Finley deserves to be a finalist over Huggy Bear? How about a guy like Tom Chambers? Tom Chambers has over 20,000 points. He's not a finalist? Instead, Marianne Stanley is? Dick Motta, not a finalist. Despite having the 13th most wins in NBA history. But Lindsey Whalen, a great player in an inferior league, is a finalist. It's wrong. It defies all logic. It needs to change. It's just that simple. So because of all that, I am only going to focus on the NBA players. Everyone else gets disqualified because they should not be mentioned in the same breath as these NBA greats. So let's start with Michael Cooper. One of the best perimeter defenders of his era. Won Defensive Player of the Year in 86-87. Was an integral part of some Lakers championship teams, along with guys like Magic and Worthy and Kareem. Cooper ended up winning 5 NBA titles. What's the knock on him? Was not a good offensive player. Put up less than 9 points per game in his career. Put up only 7,700 points in his career. Should defense alone get you into the Basketball Hall of Fame? I'm tempted to pull out my old baseball argument. Defense alone doesn't get you in, but it can help you if you're borderline. I mean, look, Cooper won 5 NBA titles. He made 8 all-defensive teams. You know who else won 5 titles and made 8 all-defensive teams? Dennis Rodman. You want to tell me Rodman was more dominant? Okay, fair enough, but it's closer than you think. Rodman was obviously a better rebounder, was a better interior defender, but on the perimeter, Cooper was better. I think it's tough to leave out a guy like Cooper when players like Dennis Rodman and Ben Wallace are in the Hall of Fame. With that being said, I would not have voted for Rodman, and I wouldn't have voted for Wallace either. So do you double down on a mistake? It's tough. It's tougher than you'd think. Look, here's the thing. People say that when a marginal player gets into a Hall of Fame, then we need to put everyone in who was better than him. I disagree with that. I don't think you double down on a mistake. You know, like if you're one of the people who said that Dennis Rodman or Ben Wallace shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, do you now need to change your view because they're already in? Or do you want to be consistent? No, I don't think I'd cast my vote for Cooper. I think I'll be consistent. With that in mind, if someone went up to me and said, how can you leave Michael Cooper out when Rodman and Wallace are in? I wouldn't be able to give them a great answer. I mean, it's tough. Once you open those floodgates, it's really hard to close them again. If Cooper was to get in, I don't think I'd bang tables over it. Hugh Evans is a name that you probably don't know, and that's okay. But this guy is one of the greatest referees in NBA history. He worked over 2,000 games if you combine his regular season and playoff games. He lasted 28 years. Was incredibly well respected by everyone. Players, coaches, GMs, league officials. He was also part of some great moments. The shrug game that Jordan had against the Blazers in the finals. He was a referee for that. Game 4 of the 01 NBA Finals when the Lakers really put a stranglehold on that series. Evans was a referee for that. Yes, Hugh Evans should be in the Hall of Fame. Great referee. He deserves to be honored as such. Next up is Manu Ginobili. If this guy doesn't get in, I don't know what's wrong with the voters. Seriously. This guy won 4 NBA titles, was the 3rd best player on 3 of those teams, made 2 All-Star teams, ended up with over 14,000 career points, won 6th Man of the Year. He honestly did not care whether he started or he came off the bench. In fact, in 11-12, he went to Greg Popovich and said, put me on the bench. Danny Green should be starting. If that's what you want to do, I have no problem with that. This guy swatted a bat out of midair during a game. He didn't care if he got rabies. And just such a fantastic story. The penultimate pick in the 99 draft. The Spurs take a flyer on him. No one knows anything about him. They don't expect anything. He spends a few years in Italy, hones his craft. And then he really hit the ground running. Like, people don't remember this. Manu Ginobili's first year in the NBA, the Spurs won a title. That was David Robinson's last year. That's when the Spurs beat the Nets in 6 games. And Ginobili was good in that series, too. Really, really good defender. Solid scorer also. Yeah, it still upsets me that the Nets lost that series. But Manu Ginobili definitely deserves to be a Hall of Famer. I don't think there's a question about that. Same thing with a guy like Tim Hardaway, 1/3 of one of the most exciting trios in NBA history. Run TMC, Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin. Those Warriors teams were exciting. Hardaway was obviously a huge part of those teams. Then he went to the Heat, played a big role there for some good Heat teams. Hardaway in his career has over 15,000 points. He was a 5-time All-Star, made 5 All-NBA teams. I understand that he made homophobic comments in 2007, but he apologized. I think it's okay for people to evolve and change. I do think people can change. Look, what Hardaway said was terrible, and I'm sure that if he could take it back, he would. But are we going to let some stupid comments from 15 years ago stand in the way of honoring a great player? I'm not excusing what Hardaway said. And if Hardaway was still homophobic, okay, that's a different argument. But he's not. He's very pro-gay marriage, which is the correct way to be. Love is love. Any 2 consenting adults should be able to get married. I think we can all agree on that. It's 2022. Tim Hardaway should be in the Hall of Fame. If you've evolved as a person and you realize the mistakes that you've made, that's okay. I have no problem with that. Marquis Johnson had a really interesting career. Was on his way to being a great player. Was a 5-time All-Star, made 3 All-NBA teams. He was a great player. But then he got hurt. Ruptured a disc in his neck. He missed 2 seasons. It effectively ended his career. But there was a time for 9 seasons where Marquis Johnson was one of the most dominant players in the NBA. I mean, he has just under 14,000 points. If you look at the NBA/ABA leaderboard for points per game, Johnson is 66th. He's ahead of guys like Walt Bellamy and Bob Lanier and Paul Pierce and T-Mac and Magic Johnson and guys like that. The thing is, though, part of being great is staying healthy. If Johnson didn't get hurt, he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But no titles, never even made an NBA Finals. I can't do it. I can't say that Marquis Johnson should be in the Hall of Fame. The last guy to talk about is George Karl, the man with the 6th most wins in NBA history. Coached for 27 seasons. Made an NBA Finals with the Supersonics in 96. But lost to the Bulls in 6 games. See, the thing with Karl is he was a really tough coach to play for. I know that Carmelo Anthony had issues with him. DeMarcus Cousins had issues with him. He was a very demanding coach. And the lack of playoff success does hurt him a little bit. But he does have more wins than Rick Adelman. Adelman's in the Hall of Fame despite not winning an NBA title. I think it's hard to leave out the guy with the 6th most wins in NBA history. Yeah, George Karl should be in the Hall of Fame. The fact that some players didn't like him, that's not enough to keep him out. Moving on now to the Nets signing Goran Dragic off the buyout market. He will replace Javon Carter on the roster. Oh my gosh, what a steal. What a fantastic coup for the Nets. It really didn't look like Dragic was going to sign with the Nets. I thought he was going to sign with the Bucks. Actually, truthfully, when Chris Paul got hurt and it was announced that he'd miss a lot of time, I thought he was going to go to the Suns. Go back to where it all started. Instead, he rejoins one of his former Suns teammates in Steve Nash. And another one in Amari Stoudemire. Oh, this is great. This is fantastic. What if the Nets needed for realistically all year? A true backup point guard. Javon Carter failed miserably. There are very few players in NBA history that I have hated watching more than Javon Carter. I thought his defense was overrated, never looked to pass. I understand that he turned it on the last few games or so, but overall, he's just not a good player. Alright, Javon Carter's not getting minutes on an NBA title winner. Goran Dragic is. Goran Dragic is an all-star. Goran Dragic is a really good shooter. Last year for the Heat, he shot 37.3% from beyond the arc. He knows what it takes to win in this league. He was with the Heat when they made the finals. He is going to have a huge role on the Nets. The only thing that I'm really not going to like is the fact that it's going to take so long to see him actually play for the Nets. Because the Nets have these ramp-up periods to get players back into game shape. And Dragic hasn't played since November 13th. I mean, I understand it's for the player's benefit. You don't want to throw him back out there immediately. He won't look as good. He'll get fatigued easily. Yeah, I understand that. But it's still frustrating that Dragic technically could play on Thursday, but he's not going to. Same thing with a guy like Ben Simmons. Like, here's the thing. The Nets haven't been at full strength all year. And God only knows when they're going to be at full strength. I'll get more into it on the Nets show that I'm going to do tonight. But it is frustrating that this team hasn't been at full strength all year. But I'll say this. The Nets are more well-rounded than they were with James Harden. As much as I hated the Harden trade, but they are a more complete basketball team than they were 2 weeks ago. Think about the 4 players that they just brought in. Ben Simmons improves the defense. Seth Curry improves the shooting. Andre Drummond improves the interior presence. Goran Dragic gives the Nets a true backup point guard. He is a proven veteran. He is a good shooter. He is a good scorer. I mean, think about the roster that the Nets now have. Irving, Curry, Durant, Simmons, Drummond, Dragic, Mills, Thomas, Griffin, Aldridge, Edwards, Brown, maybe Joe Harris, Johnson, Claxton, Sharp, Duke. This is a deep team. This is a complete team. It's a team that can beat you in a ton of different ways. Do I know for sure what their playoff rotation is going to be? The answer is no. I don't think Steve Nash knows right now. What's happening with Kyrie? What other injuries might there be? What's Joe Harris's status? Who are the Nets going up against? That's the thing. If you're going up against a team like the Heat, you're going to need to play them differently than you would the Sixers. If you're playing a team like the Cavs, you're going to need to play them differently than you would a team like the Bucks. The Nets now have a ton of versatility. They have shooting. They have defense. They have rebounding. They have spacing. They have playmaking. They have everything that you need to win. See, the thing is, with Harden, the Nets roster didn't have a lot of spacing. It required a guy like Harden to create a lot. Same thing with Durant. Same thing with Kyrie. Now, this roster is really complete. I don't want to say that the Nets are title favorites, but they are much better now than they were 24 hours ago. There's no question about that. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Vault Talk. Specifically on Brian Flores latching on with the Steelers as the most overqualified linebackers coach / senior defensive assistant in NFL history. If any team was gonna bring in Brian Flores, it would be the Steelers. The Rooney Rule was named after Dan Rooney, a former Steelers owner. Mike Tomlin, Steelers head coach, is one of the few black coaches in the NFL. So he's a guy who can empathize with what Flores has gone through. Look, if I was the current owner of the Steelers, Art Rooney II, I'd be hesitant to bring in Brian Flores. The lawsuit would be concerning to me. I mean, I said when Flores filed this lawsuit that he shot himself in the foot. He'll never coach in the NFL again. I'm glad that's not true. Because he does deserve to be coaching in the NFL. He's better than some head coaches. I mean, like I said, he's the most overqualified linebackers coach maybe in NFL history. I mean, look, it's very possible that the NFL may have leaned on Art Rooney II and said, hey, given what your father did in helping establish the Rooney Rule, we want you to bring in Flores in some capacity, or at least convince Tomlin to bring him on. It'll help our optics a little bit. Is there any proof of that? No, but I think it needs to be discussed. I think it's a legitimate possibility. I mean, the NFL got heat when Colin Kaepernick didn't latch on with an NFL team. Did they want that same heat with Flores? Probably not. So, yes, Flores isn't a head coach right now, but look, he's still employed by an NFL team. And if guys like Devin Bush and TJ Watt and guys like that ball out, Flores will become a head coach again. Look, it's risky. This could backfire. I mean, Flores just sued the Miami Dolphins, his former employer. What's to stop him from suing the Steelers at some point? Let's say Mike Tomlin gets fired, and Flores interviews for the head coaching job but doesn't get it. A white guy gets it. Flores is going to scream bloody murder. I mean, did the Steelers staff improve? Yes, there's no question. But I'll tell you right now, if I was an NFL owner, I'd want to steer clear of Flores. You want to tell me that I can't hold the lawsuit against him? Come on. Be reasonable. Would you hire him? If he sued his former employer, why would you want to bring someone in with that history? Seriously. That's not a good look for Flores. That's something I need to consider. That's why he didn't get the Texans job. The Steelers improved. There's no question about that. But this is a risky hire that could blow up in the Steelers' face down the line. For their sake, I hope it doesn't. Because they're throwing him a bone here when they really didn't need to. I'll close this show out with some Nhl Vault Talk. I know there are a couple deaths that I should talk about, but I want to do that tomorrow where there won't be as much to talk about. It'll still be relevant, I promise. Instead, I want to talk about the Maple Leafs trading Nick Ritchie and either their third-round pick in 2023 or their second-rounder in 2025 to the Coyotes for Ilya Lyubushkin and Ryan Dzingel. The thing is, though, Dzingel won't play a single game for the Leafs because the San Jose Sharks claimed him. What happened was the Leafs wanted Dzingel's entire contract, $1.1 million, to be buried in the minor leagues. So it didn't count against their cap. In order to do that, they had to waive Dzingel. I mean, look, the Leafs have virtually no cap space. They had to get creative, and that's what they did. they ran the risk of losing him on waivers. And that's what happened. So the trade is Richie and either a second or a third for Liu Bushkin. I mean, this is sort of a salary dump for the Leafs. Richie was making a decent chunk of change, but he wasn't playing for the Leafs, he was playing for the Marlies. So if you're a team that has basically no cap room, you've got to make every dollar count. So yeah, give Richie away to a team like the Coyotes. That makes perfect sense. Will Richie turn it around with the Coyotes? Possibly. I'm not giving up on Richie. He's only 26. He put up 9 points in 33 games for the Leafs this year. He's not a bad third liner. Not great defensively, but he's not a bad third liner. And I'll say this, even though they're not going to get Zingle, Liu Bushkin does make sense for him. He's a physical defenseman, big player, not afraid to throw his body around, but does so in a clean way. The Leafs really don't have that physical threat. Maybe Wayne Simmons, but he really hasn't done that a lot this year. So look, the trade makes sense for the Leafs. Liu Bushkin does fill a hole. And they had wanted to get rid of Richie for a while. I'll say this though, the Coyotes won the trade. They get a second or third rounder and a solid young player. And they're giving up two guys who really didn't fit what they wanted to do long term in Liu Bushkin and Zingle. That's a good job by the Coyotes. They win this trade. The trade makes sense for the Leafs, but the Coyotes do win it. Brooklyn Nets show comes your way tonight. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.